This week on Startup Different, we're talking to a kids mindfulness expert. Meet Cynthia Arscott, the CEO and founder of Goldmines, a mindfulness story app for kids. As a child, Cynthia struggled with anxiety and was unable to do anything about it. Blown away by how much better she felt after practicing mindfulness and meditation, she realized that this is what she needed to learn as a child and created Goldmines. Let's get Zen on Startup Different. This is the Startup Different podcast, hosted by successful entrepreneurs and brothers Dave and Chris Sinkinson. We're here to bust startup myths and give you the insights you need to help you reach your startup dreams. Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of Startup Different. I am Dave. That guy is Christopher, and we have another person here today, Cynthia. What's going on?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, super thrilled to have you here. Goldmines. Also, first off, just great name. Like, seriously good name. Because, I feel like, all this, obviously, kids' minds, the future and all those things. And also helping people with kiddos with meditation. That's pretty neat.
Oh, I made my husband lie down in Trinity Bellwoods with me years ago. And I just said, the point of today is to brainstorm names for this business of mine.
Oh,
and
cool.
He was like, great.
This is
Love
not
that.
what I wanted to do.
This is like early days in our relationship. So he was like, great. So yeah, we brainstormed hundreds. I knew I wanted the word minds in it, but what came before that was really hard.
Did
to
you
come
have
up
like a
with.
runner-up or like a couple? Can you even remember now?
Happy minds,
Okay.
something to do with minds being calm.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, so we finished up our day at the park, didn't have a name. And then we got in an Uber to go over to a friend's and we passed by this building that said Stay Gold. And my brain was like, Goldmines, like that's the name and that's the connection.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool thing. I also big fan of Trinity Bellwoods Park. Used to live really close to there back in the day. Out of curiosity, what year was that?
2017,
Yeah,
2018,
it's very
maybe?
possible
Yeah.
I was in the park at the same
You
time.
probably were.
Going like, what are these people yelling about over here? It's so fun. That's cool. So obviously we want to talk about Goldmines in your business, but before we get there, I always like the story behind the story. And I want to understand sort of how you got to where you are today and the work it took and kind of that journey. And then we'll get into your business. So let's start with that. So you tell me a bit about how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so I was working in tech. I was working at Uber Eats. I was doing sales for them for a while. And I was noticing as an adult that I was experiencing quite a bit of anxiety. And I'm really big into personal development. So I wanted to figure out where it was coming from and essentially what I could do about it because it was driving me insane. And so I did a lot of things. I, went to therapy. I started practicing meditation and mindfulness. And I was really blown away by how well mindfulness worked for me. I finally felt like I could control my mind and really zoom out from that anxiety.
Cool.
And it was then that I realized that that was what I needed as a kid. Through all of that learning about myself, I realized that the anxiety came from bullying and different experiences that I had as a child.
Yeah.
So it was, as a kid, you don't really know what to do with these feelings. You just think, oh, something's wrong with me. I'm weird. So I really wanted to create something that was specifically for kids because as we know, it's much harder to teach an old dog new tricks than it is to teach kids. Kids absorb things like sponges. So that was where I decided to get certified to teach meditation and mindfulness to kids. So I did a number of teacher certifications, got ready to teach it. And my original business idea was school mindfulness programs.
Okay.
So a good friend of mine said, hey, I'm in a bunch of schools for my kids program. I'll help you get into one so you can test it out. So I created this mindfulness program and I was so nervous going to my very first class teaching them. And I taught my first mindfulness class to about 8 kids on my lunch break.
How old are they?
They were about 6, 7 years old.
Yeah, just those little ones.
Little ones.
Wow,
yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's how it started.
Wow, that's incredible. I got to say, for somebody who describes themselves as somebody who's struggled with anxiety, you're remarkably calm right now. So you definitely are doing something right.
I've come a long way.
Yeah.
I've come a long way.
You should be proud of yourself, is what I'm
Thank
saying.
you.
It's very impressive. So
Thank you.
Okay, so you started out, you kind of got this opportunity out of school, and how did that class actually go? Like, was it a good outcome? Do you think those kids really benefit from that? Or
I think it went pretty well. I prepared a lot for it because I was so nervous for it. My friend dropped me off on our lunch break, and to ease my nerves, he had to put on my favorite song to kind of get the jitters out of me.
Okay.
But
What's your favorite song?
The song of the time was Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield.
Okay,
Kind of
yeah.
made a comeback recently from the movie anyone but you. I think.
Yeah. My wife. Anyway, keep
Yeah.
going. You know what you're saying.
Rom-coms.
That's right. Yeah.
But anyways, that was the song that my friend put on and blasted so that I could get into a better place.
That's
and yeah,
fun.
I think the class went well. I don't know. Looking back, if I were to watch myself do it, it probably was terrible. But it was.
Well, I mean,
was
the first one's going to be
step
the
one.
worst. I'm sure it wasn't like terrible. I'm sure the kids.
Yeah,
benefited
it
for
was
sure.
probably fine. But that's kind of what kickstarted the whole journey into creating Goldmines and what it was going to be. But shortly after that, the pandemic hit and all school programs shut down. So that kind of led on the journey of figuring out what is the product. Is it a service? Is it a product? What is it?
Right. Right. And that's okay. So like COVID was crazy for everybody. It either sort of, destroyed your business or, gave you like ridiculous riches because of just the way things sort of worked out. So I guess that was the point when you started thinking about a digital transformation, because that's, if I recall correctly, like all schools were just like through Zoom, even like kindergarten classes and stuff, which like, honestly, my heart goes out to teachers. Like, I think that's when everybody sort of realized that teaching is like the hardest job. That was pretty crazy. I can't even imagine. So talk to me about how you went from being in class to COVID happening and then going into a digital sort of tool and product.
Yeah, during the pandemic, it was obviously a bit weird. Schools had shut down, programs had shut down, but then they started to come back. So there was this strange time where I started offering virtual mindfulness classes in the evenings, not necessarily for school kids, but for families. So in the evenings, parents would log their kids onto Zoom and I would teach Mindfulness Monday, and I would do it every Monday. And it became this, and I just promoted it through social media. I literally DM'd 40 people a day because I think that's the max you can DM until you get frozen. Like your account gets frozen and you can't DM anymore.
Now.
Yeah, you're spamming. So I DM'd 40 people a day. Hey, do you want to come to this free class just to get the word out? Invited all these people to Mindfulness Monday. And it became this thing that kids looked forward to, and parents were looking for things to do with their kids at that time because all extracurriculars were shut down.
Right.
And kids also needed a lot of help. They were stressed and anxious about the pandemic. So that's where it started. And then we moved, those classes got full, and then we moved to Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. And at that point in time, I truly thought I had made it. I'm like, wow, this is it. Like I've made it.
And people were paying for this, or okay, cool.
Yeah,
cool,
so I created a little membership, or you could pay per class at the time. I was trying to figure that out. And that's how things went digital as a starting point. Sure. Then schools opened a little bit. So now I'm doing both. I'm doing a little bit of school programs. I'm doing a little bit of virtual programs, trying to figure out which one of these things is going to stick. Are people interested in person now again? Or are we still doing virtual? It was a bit confusing. And then the software company that I was using to book these classes online was like, hey, we can build a white label app for you for a couple $100 a month. Are you interested? And in and around this time as well, I was pregnant with my son, thinking, how am I going to scale this, right? So I had hired some teachers to help me. So it wasn't always just me in person, but it did take a lot of live time when I was doing these evening classes too. Yeah. So I said, let's try it out. So I was probably 6 months pregnant, recording different mindfulness stories and classes, just trying to get as much content as I could recorded before my son came, and uploaded it all into this app. It was super low quality.
Okay,
I was like in my closet with just headphones.
Yeah.
So I got all that up, and my son was born, and I launched the beta app about a month after he was born.
Cool. I love the hustle. There's so much hustle in that, between like the mess of the DMs and then like the get all this out there, thinking about how to scale. These are all like super important like entrepreneurship questions, right?
Yeah, we definitely have a bias towards these entrepreneurs that are like really action oriented. Like, I'm actually going to go out and start DMing people, or start trying this app thing, start trying these things, and do some tests, do some lab experiments to see what might work for your business.
Hey, one thing that Chris and I have talked a lot about on this show is how easy it is for founders to build apps and automations with no-code tools. One of the most powerful tools out there is called Bubble. But even though Bubble is a no-code platform, it can get a little complicated to do things on your own. And so our sponsor today is an agency that's called Zero Code. That's ZeroQode, which is a top Bubble agency, and that can help you build any web, mobile, or AI application, as well as automate your entire business using no-code and AI tools. Zero Code will help you build custom solutions, CRMs, custom dashboards, marketplaces, or internal tools to automate your business much faster and cheaper. However, if you want to try to build on Bubble yourself, Zero Code is also the biggest plugin builder for Bubble, and they have more than 700 plugins. Make sure you check them out. Discover the simplicity and power of no code and AI at zerocode.com. That's zero code and code with a Q. And now back to the show. So you thought you had made it, but that sounds pretty legit, but you didn't really
I didn't really make it. Okay. No, not anywhere close to making it. It just felt that way because it was, it was growing, it was spinning. I was making a little bit of money from it, but it definitely wasn't enough. And then the whole shift back to in-person happened.
Sure.
So it was just a very confusing time of what is this business? Are we school programs or are we an app? And it wasn't until I went to this event about a year ago. I was one of the winners of the Visa She's Next grant.
Oh,
and they had this big
that's awesome.
event.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was last summer, and there was they did this big event, and they invited all these people, and it was like an art exhibit. And so here I am on the wall as this art exhibit, talking about my business to people. And as I was explaining it to them, the whole school programs thing wasn't feeling right as it was coming out of my mouth. It was like, but I kept saying, and we have an app, and everyone was like, oh, an app, and like Headspace or Calm. And so everybody was really getting it. And it was clicking for me too, that was feeling like the right channel to push forward with. And it was really at that time that I decided to stop doing school programs and go all in on this app. I had given this app to all of the families at the schools for free. So I had given hundreds of families this app. Test it out. Tell me what you think. Give me feedback.
Awesome. That's such a great idea too. Like, cause you need to get it out there, get that feedback, iteratively improve the product. I mean, we talk about the MVP all the time on the show. We love it. Eric Rees, our main man. We've never met him, but if we did, we'd be very excited.
Friend of the show,
friend of the show, friend of the pod. But obviously getting that feedback is super important. And so this really crafted your product, I guess.
It did, yeah. And the feedback that I was getting was not necessarily about mindfulness or meditation, which was what I had in my mind. Obviously, the founder has an idea of what they want, and then everybody else tells you what they want. Yeah. And what all the parents were telling me that they wanted was more sleep stories. They're like, your sleep stories are putting my kids to sleep in 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Wow.
My kid is unwinding. It's great. It's a staple in our bedtime routine. And I got that over and over and over again from parents.
Nice.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm also a new parent, and I'm realizing that all I want is sleep. So I get it now. Yeah, like all I want is my child to go to bed.
For the love of God, just go to sleep.
Please go to sleep. And sleep was a huge struggle, as it is for most people when they have kids. But it was a really big struggle for me and my family. So that's where the whole sleep side of things really came into play. So now we wanted to create a sleep/bedtime app that actually helped kids unwind and fall asleep, but using mindfulness. So all of the stories on the app incorporated different kid-friendly mindfulness techniques within the story. So the kids just think they're listening to an awesome bedtime story, but really they're taking slow, deep breaths, and they're using their 5 senses and doing all these calming things that are putting them to sleep really quickly.
That's really interesting. I will just point out, I just had my second child, my boy Luke, which is very exciting, but we're all like super tired, right? Because it's just a new routine and nobody's there yet. So this is pretty fascinating. At what age do kids normally start doing this? Like what do you recommend, I guess?
I started with my son around 1, which I felt at the time was almost too early, mostly because when they're that age, you can't see if they like it or not. They're just kind of like,
depending how like verbal they are, right? Like they especially boys, I find they don't really communicate that quickly, whereas girls might talk a bit sooner. But anyway, 1-year-old is pretty darn young.
Yeah. And even since launching, parents that have babies that are 4 months old, 5 months old, they're listening to it. And you'd be surprised. They might not completely understand what they're listening to, but they're listening to a soothing voice. They're listening to, there's always music in the background as well. So they are listening to a story and music, and it is calming them down. So we always say 0 to 10. That's our age group. Wow. And we're trying to grow with families. So, families that have babies, families that have little kids, older kids, we're trying to cater to all of them because they all
progress
need
through
help.
The application too. Like maybe the stories are more complicated or longer or something. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Chris, you haven't said anything.
I do have a question. So you were just talking about...
Is your mic on? Is his mic on?
You're talking about kids when they were like 0 or 6 months, something like that. Yeah. What about the kids at the top end? What about the 10-year-olds? Did they get to a point where they almost graduate out? Or is that something you're thinking about from a business perspective? How do you kind of turn this into a lifelong journey? Or just curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Based on the experience that I had with kids in schools, they went up to about 10. And then in and around 10, they become cool. So they get a bit cool. And some kids who are 10 and older still enjoy it. It really just depends on the child. Yeah. But I would like to keep growing with them into the teenage years. So that is something that I'm thinking about. But you have to target them in the right way. The stories have to be about things that they're interested in. So it's not impossible. Right now we do 0 to 3 as an age bracket, 4 to 6, and then 7 to 10. And so it wouldn't be too hard to create stories that were relaxing for kids who are 11 to 13, 14. But it just depends on the child. Lots of kids are interested in listening to podcasts and sleep stories. So we definitely could go that way. It's just a matter of time.
Just a matter of time and the evolution of your business. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking too, so putting this in a business context, so I have 2 books, genres that I read. I read business books and I read parenting books because I need help on the latter, and the former I find very interesting. I find both interesting, but you know what I mean. And I wonder when I think about your stories, obviously the differences between the sexes gets pretty significant as they get older. Like the stories that boys are going to hear are going to be like, superhero stories, being like kind of like saving the day sort of stuff. And for girls, it's going to be probably more about like community and like friendship and like these other things, which is complicated and maybe not right, but that's just sort of the way it is. And also something that's pushed by a lot of pop culture in different capacities. So when you think about creating these stories and effectively the product you're delivering and your product, the people who are ingesting that product being these kids, how do you build the stories to be compelling and I'm assuming they must be different based on those lines, or are there other criteria?
Yeah, that's definitely a factor. We get all of our story ideas from our community. So every single month I put up a little question box.
That's such a good idea. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So parents just write in and tell us what they want.
It's not ChatGPT?
No. No, the parents, so we'll do a question box on Instagram a couple times a month and collect feedback. We also have an area on the app where people can submit story requests. Very cool. So that's where we get our ideas from. I try to have those kinds of themes that you were talking about. I try to make it pretty gender neutral because I mean, I will say that there's definitely, many boys like trucks and dinosaurs and things like that. So I do a good mix of that. And then, lots of girls love rainbows and unicorns. Like I do lots of that too, but also just to be neutral as well. We have a create story tab where you can generate custom stories for kids. So I actually write the scripts for the stories, but you can insert the child's name. Oh, so it could be Cynthia, the colorful unicorn.
I was going to say, rainbows and unicorns is the girl's side. That's my daughter right now. So rainbows and unicorns all the time. Yeah. So eventually, apparently, it graduates to Bluey.
Okay.
I don't know when that happens, but probably around 4 or 5 years old, I think.
So just trying to make it as engaging for kids as possible, and then also tying in some of those softer skills within the stories is what I try to do. There's different categories on the app. So there's a daytime section where we have before school calm, different tracks to help kids who are having separation anxiety before heading to school, things like that. And then there's a bedtime tab, which is for kids who have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, all of that.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So we're turning into a sort of childhood podcast here all of a sudden. I want to make sure we stick to the business side.
Let's talk about some tech, because I like tech.
You nerd out, Chris.
You were just talking about how you use kind of like a white label app to kind of get going, and I think you're evolving past that now and doing your own thing. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with your tech side?
Yes. So we started with the white label. That was our test app. I realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to work for us long term. We didn't have really any data, no flexibility on what we wanted, other than changing the colors of our app essentially. So yes, I ended up speaking with a friend, actually Marley, who you've had on this podcast.
Friend of the pod.
Yeah. And so we met, and she was talking about how she was bringing on a CTO onto her team to help build her app. And that's when the gear started turning for me, and I realized that I needed to bring on a CTO.
Whoa, hang on. Did you learn something from our show?
I did.
Graham, make a note of this somehow. Can we get a gong sound added to the background, or the Rasta horn? Anyway, okay. Yeah. Sorry. No, just ignore me. It's fine.
Yeah. So that was when I realized that I needed to bring somebody on to actually build out the app. And I went on Y Combinator, and I put up a profile, and I interviewed a couple of people. I finally found the right person, and he's been absolutely incredible. He's the backbone of our business. He built out the entire app for us. He literally came to our first meeting with like a draft of what the app would look like. And I was like,
So
you're
cool.
hired.
Yeah. Welcome
He was-
aboard. Yeah, cool.
welcome aboard. So he's been great. He's still working full time and he does everything for us, usually evenings and weekends. He's also a dad.
Wow.
He works really hard and I'm so
amazing.
grateful for him. We couldn't have done anything without him.
That's amazing. And is this his full-time gig is working with you, or is this side hustle?
Side hustle.
Wow.
Yeah, he
Very
still works
impressive.
full time.
Cool.
amazing.
Wow. That's impressive. Maybe we should get him on the show next time
We
you come back
should.
on, right?
He's very talented.
That's really, really cool. That's really cool. So did you want anything else on the tech?
So you said though that right now the iOS version is up and running. You're still launching the Android version. Is that right? When does that come out?
Yeah, so iOS is up. Android should be launching within about a month.
Yeah.
Hopefully in November is when we'll have Android. We have a wait list of a couple hundred people on there
I
now.
am on that wait
yeah,
list.
we're getting close to 1,000 people on our Android wait list. People are really begging for it.
Yeah.
To be honest, I wasn't expecting it. We were going to launch Android a bit sooner, but then we had so many iOS users come on and we really wanted to focus on making their experience great because, you get thousands of people onto your app and all of a sudden you realize that there's a lot of different things that they need from user experience or maybe something slow. So we put a lot of our energy over the last month into fixing different features and adding things that people really wanted and then pushed out the Android just a little bit so that we're better suited for that in a month.
I think that's the right move. Actually, I know with kids, I get the feeling I see kids with iPads all the time, everywhere. So I'm assuming the iOS platform is probably most prevalent among your user base anyways.
It
Am I
is.
right?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, I have two questions, and it's related to iOS. So one of the things that's complicated with children is having these devices at all. So do you get pushback? Are you concerned about this, that you're introducing the device earlier in their lives? Like I know that for us, despite the fact that Chris and I started a business and with mobile applications, all this stuff, I am really, really scared to introduce a mobile device of any kind to my kids. What's your take?
That's a big conversation in
sure.
the parenting world of whether or not to introduce children to phones. Luckily, our app isn't actually for kids to be using. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Our app is designed to be used by the parent on behalf of the kids. The parent and the kids open up the phone. The child might look at the screen and select their story. But at that point, it's an audio story. Screen's locked, phone's away.
Sure.
Right.
A lot of people actually play the stories through a Bluetooth device. So Yodo players or Apple, Amazon, Alexa, any
all those things.
of them. They just play through there. And sometimes the parent has their phone in their room, but it's playing through the speaker. So that is a big topic of conversation. Parents definitely don't want their kids to have devices before bed, but our device isn't actually being used before bed. It's just being listened to. So it's a bit different.
So it's not screen time.
It's not screen time.
It's just
That's
ear
great.
time.
That's really good.
Cool.
That's really good. It's actually almost like radio, basically.
Yeah.
Would your wife be okay with that?
Yeah, 100%. I think so.
Okay.
I mean, during quiet time, because my daughter does quiet time,
Yep.
we have like a little Bluetooth speaker and we just play music that she likes while
There you
she's
go.
doing her quiet time. So it'd be the same.
Exactly.
Kind
And
of
we have quiet time stories on our app
Oh, really?
for
Oh,
exactly that. So
I'm on the waiting list.
yeah, I know.
I think your wife has an iPhone though.
You are correct, sir.
There's no excuse.
Get on it, Dave.
You really threw me under the bus on that one. Second to last question. I want to understand your competitors because you mentioned a few of them, I think indirectly. So now you've definitely carved out a niche. Children, bedtime, like that's really, really specific. And I think that's the thing that's your biggest strength. But are you worried like Headspace comes out with something? Are you worried about like or have they already? I don't even know. Yeah.
Headspace already has a section for kids
Okay.
on their app. So, and so does Calm. And then Calm also has an app called Moshi, and it's a children's story/games app.
Okay.
So I'm not worried about them because they already exist. I don't think that they do it very well, in my opinion. And that's what I was trying to do better.
Yeah.
Those apps are designed for adults,
Sure.
except for Moshi. The Calm and Headspace are designed for adults, and they do have some children's stories. They just don't have as much customization. It's not as engaging or as fun for kids, in my opinion. And it's what I've also heard from our audience as well. They still do a great job for adults, but I don't think that the niche for kids is really carved out yet. So that was where we wanted to come in. We also, Moshi, it's a bit more game focused. They do have meditations and sleep stories, but it's a lot of screen time,
No
play,
games.
things
I
that
don't
we
want games.
No, there's
Yeah.
no games on our app. We're not planning to ever be a game
Yeah, don't do that.
app.
At least not for now. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting though.
You know, it's really interesting because we were always the small guy, the underdog in our marketplaces, and we loved being in that position. I was never worried about losing to a big competitor. I was worried about somebody smaller than us coming up with a good idea and then making our lives difficult. So I think you're in a great position. I'd rather be in your shoes than in their shoes because I'm sure they've got big financial commitments to hit. Whereas you guys are like, hey, we're just here. We're just going to do our thing.
We're just
going to listen to our
here.
customers.
We're bootstrapped.
Exactly. Somebody's talking to you. You're talking to the founder. Like I think that's meaningful.
Yeah. So. I like that too. I think that's the new wave of entrepreneurship. Anyone who becomes a business or has a business also becomes an influencer in a sense, where a content creator. It kind of comes with the job, especially if you're, a consumer-facing business.
Definitely, I could see that. I mean, even in our B2B space, I would still be on calls and stuff. I would still just pop into demos. I would do whatever because I thought it was meaningful for the people that are going to engage with smaller companies. They know that you're a smaller company, but they want that experience and they want to talk to you. And you can be like, look, I really care about what you're doing. In your case, I care about your children. I want them to get to sleep. We've been working really hard on this, and I think that means a lot. So. I also wanted to say too that that's the real key to success. I think for a lot of entrepreneurs like watching today is going into a market niche, even if it feels small. A lot of the time we talk about like TAM, your total addressable market, and it's got to be like, well, if we get 1% of this $1 billion market, like go into a small market that's worth, let's just say, I don't know, $50 million or something. But if you dominate that market, like that's a huge amount of money. That is totally legit. So I think that's for you, and I think this is what you're saying effectively. It's like you're getting really good at one part of this really big market, and that's going to be the key to one of the keys to your success.
Exactly, and becoming really sticky in that market as well is what we're finding, especially over the last month, is that people are using this as a staple in their bedtime routines, but then they're also introducing it maybe on the car ride to school and during different points of the day where it's become very sticky. Like people are relying on it, kids are asking for it, and that's the best place to be, where like the kids are wanting these stories too.
Right. Cool. So, startup myth. We always ask people about a startup myth. Do you have one you'd like to share with us for today?
Yes.
Oh.
Let me start that again. I always thought that I needed to work really hard and that's how I would be successful. Everyone always told me, work really hard, get a business plan going, work 70 hours a week, and that's how you're going to be successful. And none of that was true. I worked really hard. I created a business plan, ended up throwing it out the window because everything changed anyways. And I decided that I wasn't going to work that many hours anymore, especially because I had a child. I wanted to be present with him. So I just started working less. But when I do work, let's say I work 3-4 hours a day, I get a full day's work done in that amount of time. And I've just realized too, it's consistency over time. It's not necessarily hours in a week. It's how consistent are you over time? And I've been consistent over almost 4 years to get to the point where our app has launched and been successful and finally profitable. Like that's taken 4 years, but it took a lot of time for me to push through that. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, should I stop? Should I quit? What am I doing with my life? Went through all of that, but really just needed to be consistent over time and work smarter, partner with the right people.
That's awesome. I totally agree. We were there. And also I love that you said profit, because profitability is the key. You hear a lot of people talking about revenue, but profit is kind of where it's at. That's where you want to be. So that's really, really good to hear as well. Where can people go to learn more about Goldminds?
Yeah, you can follow us on Instagram at Goldmines App, or you can follow me at Cynthia Arscott. Okay.
Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us. Super cool. I will get it on my wife's phone. Anna, if you're watching right now, let's get that. And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this information with our audience.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the episode. Nicely done. If you enjoyed this episode, like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so the almighty algorithm can help others find us. Want more from Startup Different? Check out our book, Startup Different, the myth-busting blueprint for your multi-million-dollar business. Follow us on social. We're big on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also check us out at startupdifferent.com. Special thanks for this episode to Graham and our friends at Toronto Podcasts. Visit them at torontopodcast.ca. See you next week.